And I was like, oh man, I've had a lot of coffee today. That is just the craziest thought. Too much caffeine. Lay off the caffeine, Sarah. I knew it was God. I 100% knew it was God. Not even a shadow of doubt, but I did not want to listen to that. And that seemed absolutely crazy to me. So I wrestled with him, barely sleeping for a week because every time it was quiet, I just felt that nudge again and again. Welcome to the My Two Cents podcast, where we explore the financial things that many of us never learned in church. Every week, we'll dive into what Scripture says about work, saving, investing, debt, generosity, stewardship, and everything in between. Not to build bigger bank accounts, but to build hearts that trust God more fully. I'm Sarah Grown, and these are My Two Cents. All right, this is take 4 of this episode. I had to stop multiple times because my kids were yelling at each other. I think it was excitement, but needless to say, talking way too loud. And then the first two, I was just like, yeah, I'm not pleased with them. And I know I told you the last one that I was just going to do it bad. But sometimes I'm just like, no, I didn't actually say what I meant to say, so I'm going to start over. So that's where we are. Okay, so needless to say, the reason I think I'm starting over so many times is because this podcast, I'm sharing one of my very favorite stories, one of the most powerful stories that I often share, and the lesson that I've learned through it. But it's so easy to misinterpret or mishear. I've been very cautious not to do that with my own story. Something we're actually going to talk about in the next episode is how we need to take our experiences and read them through the lens of Scripture instead of reading Scripture through the lens of our experiences. I just realized that my trim over here is white and I need to paint it black. We'll see if I can get that done by the next episode, you guys. Okay, anyways, sorry. Let's jump into the story. So back in COVID time, the churches had been closed down for a while and they were just opening back up. And I really needed, and I say that word understanding, not everything is a need, but my nervous system needed a church with an open nursery. I needed someone else to hold my children for an hour. And I say that as a stay-at-home mom who's with my kids all the time. I don't have anything against them, but in those little years in the trenches, if you don't have any kind of support system, it is just not healthy. And it wasn't for me. It was traumatic. So needless to say, any church that had a nursery I was open to. Our original church opened back up, but they did not open up their nursery or their toddler rooms. And so I just went searching and I found a church just 15 minutes from us with decent theological beliefs that had nursery. And so I went with them. Just went there. And within 2 weeks, the ladies there had invited me to their mom's Bible study. And I found myself in a Sunday school room that was obviously used for kids, gathered around a plastic table with a bunch of moms on a Tuesday morning. Now, one of the moms there that day shared this really just heartbreaking situation that her family was going through. And even though I barely knew her, I just felt, oh man, I should give to her GoFundMe. That sounds heartbreaking. And I had a number in my head rolling around about what I should give her, what I could maybe squeeze out of the budget to give her. We had just come out of a really hard season of paying off debt, eating beans and rice. We were still in that season. Our income was very low, but we did have an emergency savings thanks to my husband getting into a horrible motorcycle accident and getting a settlement from that. So we did have savings in our emergency fund, but it was not much. It was about 1 month's worth of emergency savings, which if you've heard from any financial gurus, a family of 4 should have 3 to 6 months worth of emergency savings. Even I will tell you that. We just didn't have it yet. Our margin was so thin. We didn't even have internet and we were barely buying groceries. So even this amount that was going on in my head was like, I don't know where the margin is for that, but I'm sure I can maybe make it work. It'll be fine. And as I was leaving that Bible study to go pick up my kids, I remember walking down the hallway there, and in my spirit, I heard God say, give 10 times that. And I was like, oh man, I've had a lot of coffee today. That is just the craziest thought. Too much caffeine. Lay off the caffeine, Sarah. I knew it was God. I 100% knew it was God. Not even a shadow of doubt, but I did not want to listen to that. And that seemed absolutely crazy to me. But needless to say, one of the other ways I know that God is speaking to me, besides just knowing that voice, is that he pesters me. He doesn't let me alone. And so I wrestled with him, barely sleeping for a week, because every time it was quiet, I just felt that nudge again and again. So I would spend a lot of time looking at my budget, trying to rearrange it, trying to find something I had missed, like some margin that was available. Because the truth of the matter is, yes, I could give it out of my emergency fund, and I knew that. But what I was concerned about was, how am I going to replenish that out of my emergency fund? Already, we were needing to build up 2 more months, which was not happening because our margin was so thin. And here I am trying to figure out, all right, now we're going backwards. Our margin hasn't changed. Is there something I missed? Like, how are we going to build that back up? Because that's the wise thing to do. I know that's the wise thing to do. There was no way. There was nothing. I had tried for a week to figure it out. So I argued with the Lord about it. And I was like, God, this is for emergencies. This is not for giving. My giving envelope is empty right now. My emergency fund is not supposed to get touched for anything besides emergencies. And God said, it might not be your emergency, but it is an emergency. But I'm stubborn, so I keep arguing. I was like, God, you know what? If I called in and asked Dave Ramsey, told him this whole scenario, I barely know this lady. What if she has finances aplenty? Dave Ramsey would tell me this is foolish. And God said, are you going to listen to Dave Ramsey, or are you going to listen to me? Yeah, Mama didn't raise no fool. So I listened to God, and I transferred the money out of my savings account and gave it away. It was so nice to just have God not pestering me after that. Nothing crazy happened for weeks. The only relief really came from, okay, God, I did what you told me to do. Now leave me alone. Stop pestering me about this. I did it. And for weeks went by, like, all right, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out somehow. And then 18 days later, which feels slightly significant because that is my husband's favorite number, and it shows up a lot in our life for weird reasons. I'm not really a number person, but it's almost like God knows that's our favorite number, and so he just pops it into our life so that we know it's him. 18 days later, my husband had found a job that he was applying for out of the blue. He really wasn't looking, and got accepted on the spot for it. Now, at the time that he got accepted for this job, I'm saying these details because I want you to see that it took time before we realized what God had done. At the time that we accepted this job, it looked like a lateral move. It looked kind of scary because he had been in his old job for 16 years. There was a lot of security there. This was something brand new. It was similar to some work he had done, but at the same time, very different. But we both felt peace about it. And so he took the job and jumped over there. And over the course of the next year, our income doubled. Doubled. The reason that I share this story is not to say, look, give, and God will give to you. Although God does love to give us good gifts. It says in Matthew that even if we just give a little one a cup of cold water, we won't lose our reward. But the truth of the matter is, we have no guarantee that reward is going to be on this side of eternity. We know for sure we can stand solidly on that reward being on the other side of eternity. I don't know that I can say that was a reward or not. But what I do know for certain is that God knew what was coming. God knew that we were going to have the margin to replace that and more. God knew that we weren't going to have any major emergencies in the next couple months, in the next 6 months. God knew that my husband was going to find a job that he loved. That's really the revolutionary thing that I have found in this story is God is omniscient. Omniscient means he's all-knowing. He doesn't just know what's going on in our minds and our hearts, although that's so important. God actually knows all micro and macroeconomics. The top economists in the world will fully admit to you that economics is incredibly complicated. And it's fascinating to me. I've looked into it a little here and there because that's my niche, but it's incredibly complicated, but it's not to God. It's not. He knows exactly how it works. It doesn't faze him, not even a little bit. Not only does he know micro and macroeconomics and how the world works as a whole, how humanity financially works with each other and doesn't work with each other. He knows all of that, but he also knows when your car's check engine light is going to flicker on again. He also knows the dream job that you're going to get 15 years from now. He knows it all. And because he is all knowing, every step of the way, every single thing into the future, into the past, all of our deepest longings and desires, because he knows everything and because he is good, he is trustworthy. And that doesn't just mean trusting and obeying when he prompts our hearts to do things that sound crazy, although that is part of it. It is also trusting and obeying the principles that he's given us in his word. We see financial principles all throughout the Bible, principles about saving and investing and planning and understanding, like knowing what's in front of you and stewarding it well, all throughout the Bible. Do we trust God enough to believe that what he's put in the Bible is for good, is for humanity's good, is for our good? Because this is another complicated piece of this. We live in a broken world, right? That means that God's principles are good and they're for humanity. And if all humanity were to follow them, we would see a lot less poverty. We would see an incredible amount of abundance, but we don't. We live in a very broken world where most people do not follow God's design for how humanity should handle their finances, right? And because of that, there's plenty of Christians who can follow God's design for their money themselves wholly and lose everything. We don't have to look far. I could just mention the underground church and Christians living in Muslim countries. And I think you'll understand full well that they did not flourish individually because they follow God's financial principles, because we live in a very broken world with an enemy who's trying to devour. And there's so much more to this discussion. We can talk about motives of our heart. People could say, all right, I'm going to follow God's principles because I want to be wealthy. And that's actually to their demise. If you're going to take God's principles and use them for selfish, vain desires, I just want to be wealthy. The truth of the matter is it might work. There's a good possibility if you live in a first world country, if you follow those, it might really work. But at the same time, what is it to gain the whole world if you're going to lose your soul? We see so much about heart motives throughout the whole scripture, especially when it comes to money, because it seems to have an extra special ability to twist our hearts and turn us away from the Lord instead of towards. But when we submit all of our money, like I talked about in the last episode, when it's 100% under his lordship, we're stewarding, we're managing, we're doing what we can, what we've been told to do, what the task is in front of us. But he owns it all. And if he says, all right, I'm closing up shop today, we close up shop today. And when it's that way, our hearts are far less likely to get twisted. And so that's why that was one of the most foundational things I talked about even before this, is because there is, honestly, I think there's actually a lot of Christians even out there that know God's financial principles are for their good. And living in a first world country, they're going to see flourishing, very likely going to see flourishing from following his principles, and their heart motive's not right. And that can really destroy them. And so I honestly, like, as much as I pray for people to financially break free from bondage and flourish in their lifetime, I also would rather they don't, if that means that their heart is farther from the Lord instead of closer to him. Which is why this episode is so tricky. I feel like I could talk about this for an hour and still not feel like I have dug into all the intricacies of how complicated finances and faith is. So I'm going to actually leave it at that for now. The next episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more, like I had said earlier, about just interpreting the scriptures. That's really a foundational piece that I wish that the church had talked more about. In fact, if you want to be able to see the prosperity gospel when you see it, know when you hear it, if you want to know when you can hear the poverty gospel, if you want to know whether something is true or not, you can take it to the Bible, but you have to know how to read the Bible. And this is something I wish the church had more deep discipleship classes about, because it saddens me that I was 35 before I actually got a book that taught me about how to do this. I think it's becoming more and more relevant, which is very exciting. Churches are understanding the need for this, but we're going to dive into that a little bit in the next episode. Until then, subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. I also put together a PDF bundle for you. I took my top 4 freebie PDFs that people have loved, and I just put them all together in a bundle. You can print one of them, you can print 3 of them. There's financial prayers, there's a financial reset. So I'll include the link for that in the show notes. All right, guys, I'm looking forward to next week. See you later.